The sound of ripping fabric still wakes me at 3 a.m. sometimes, even though Harvard's libraries are 1,000 miles from that gymnasium in Connecticut. 20 years teaching literature at various prep schools, and I've collected enough stories to fill volumes. But Emma Rodriguez, her story rewrote everything I thought I knew about courage. It started, as these things often do, with something as mundane as a parking space. But I am getting ahead of myself. Picture this Westfield Preparatory Academy, where the parking lot gleams with more luxury cars than a Beverly Hills dealership. September morning, 7:15 sharp. I'm grading papers in my classroom, windows cracked open to catch that first hint of autumn. When I hear the commotion, "Hey, Walmart, wrong parking lot," Dylan Mitchell's voice. Even from the second floor, I'd recognize that entitled drawl anywhere. I set down my red pen and moved to the window. Below, a girl stood frozen beside a Honda Civic that had seen better decades. Emma Rodriguez, though I didn't know her name yet. Just another scholarship kid about to learn what those of us who'd survived this place already knew: Westfield had its own laws of gravity, and money was the only thing that could defy them. But here's where I should tell you something about Emma that nobody knew that morning. Not Dylan, not the crowd already gathering with their phones out, not even me. 3 months earlier, she'd spent her summer in a very different kind of education. While Dylan was sailing off Martha's Vineyard and the rest of Westfield's elite were on their European tours, Emma was in a converted garage in Bridgeport, learning how to break a chokehold from a woman who'd earned a Medal of Honor in Afghanistan. Sorry, I'm doing it again, starting at the end when I should be at the beginning. My therapist says it's because I'm still processing what happened. She's probably right. 20 years of keeping quiet about what goes on in places like Westfield does things to you. Let me back up. Really, back up. Emma's mother, Rosa, had called me in August. We'd never met, but she'd found my name through some circuitous path of guidance counselors and education nonprofits. Her daughter had won the Henderson Scholarship full ride to Westfield Prep for exceptional students from underserved communities. Rosa was terrified. "Ms. Walsh," she'd said, her accent softening the edges of her worry. "I work 3 jobs to keep our apartment. I can't protect her in that world. But you, the counselor, said you understand. You were like her." I'd finished. Yes, I was a scholarship kid too. What I didn't tell Rosa was that I still had scars from my time at Westfield. Not visible ones, those had faded. But some wounds run deeper than skin. Emma started calling me that same week. Not for advice about classes or college prep. She wanted to know the real things: where to buy the right kind of clothes on a budget, how to navigate lunch when you can't afford the sushi bar, whether it was better to hide your background or own it. Own it, I'd told her, but be smart about it. Looking back, I wonder if I should have warned her more explicitly. But how do you prepare a 17-year-old for casual cruelty wrapped in privilege? How do you explain that at Westfield? Destroying someone's life was just another extracurricular activity. The morning of the parking lot incident, I'd actually been optimistic. Emma had been at school for a week without major incident. She'd found her rhythm: first to arrive, last to leave. Head down, grades up. The same survival strategy I'd used 20 years ago. But Dylan Mitchell had been away that first week. Family trip to close some deal that would fund another wing of the library. He'd returned that Monday morning to find his hereditary parking spot, yes. That was a real thing at Westfield, occupied by a Honda Civic with a Rosa's Cleaning Service sticker peeling off the bumper. I watched from my window as Emma tried to defuse the situation. She moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned early that the world was full of unexpected explosions. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Didn't know?" Dylan's laugh could have stripped paint. "Let me educate you. Food stamps. This spot, my brother parked here. My father parked here? Hell, my grandfather probably parked his horse here when this place still had standards." The crowd laughed. Of course they did. At Westfield, Dylan Mitchell's approval was currency, and everyone wanted to be rich. Emma's hands were steady as she reached for her keys. That should have been my first clue that this girl was different. Most scholarship kids would have been shaking, apologizing, maybe even crying. Emma just looked tired. Not defeated tired. There's a difference, though I wouldn't understand it until later. "Move the piece of shit," Dylan continued, playing to his audience, "before I have it towed. Actually," he pulled out his phone, that year's latest iPhone, naturally. "Everyone needs to see this." The camera flash caught Emma's face in profile. Even from my window, I could see her jaw tighten. Dylan posted it immediately. I'd see it later. Tagged with "wrong neighborhood" and "Walmart invasion." Within minutes, it had hundreds of views from Westfield students. Emma drove away, found another spot in the far lot where the maintenance staff parked. Dylan peeled into his space. Victory complete. The crowd dispersed, ready to spread the story through marble hallways and mahogany-paneled classrooms. I should have gone down, should have said something. But I had my own survival to think about. 20 years of careful neutrality, of being the cool teacher who never quite took sides. It's amazing how institutional trauma can make cowards of us all. Emma was in my AP Literature class, 3rd period. She walked in 2 minutes before the bell, took her usual seat by the window, not the back where she could hide, not the front where she'd be a target, but the middle sides where she could observe everything. Strategic. Another thing I should have noticed. We were discussing Gatsby that day, the American dream and its casualties. The irony wasn't lost on me as Madison Hartwell, 4th generation Westfield. Bound for Yale, like her mother and grandmother, explained how Gatsby's problem was trying to be something he wasn't. "He should have just accepted his place," Madison said, examining her manicure. "Some people are born for certain things. It's not cruel, it's just reality." The class murmured agreement. I caught Emma's eye, saw something flicker there. Not anger calculation. She was taking notes, but not about Gatsby. "Ms. Rodriguez," I said, breaking my own rule about calling on scholarship kids in loaded discussions. "What's your take on Gatsby's pursuit?" She looked up, and for a second, I saw myself at 17, weighing the cost of honesty. "I think," Emma said slowly, "that the real tragedy isn't that Gatsby reached for something beyond his grasp. It's that he felt he had to erase himself to do it. Like the person he was born as was some kind of disease that needed curing." The room went quiet. Madison's hand froze mid-hair flip. "But that's the point." Dylan's voice came from the back. I hadn't even noticed him in class. He had a way of materializing for maximum impact. "Some diseases do need curing, like thinking you belong somewhere you don't." A few laughs, nervous but eager, the social hierarchy reasserting itself. Emma turned in her seat, looked Dylan straight in the eye. "Is that what your brother thought?" The air left the room. Everyone knew about James Mitchell Westfield, class of 2019. Harvard freshman. Found in his dorm room with a bottle of pills and a note about pressure and disappointment. But nobody talked about it. Ever. Dylan's face went white, then red. "You don't know." "I know what it's like to lose someone," Emma said quietly. And I know grief doesn't give you a free pass to spread misery. She turned back to face me, calm as a lake after lightning. Sorry, Ms. Walsh. To answer your question, I think Gatsby's real tragedy was believing that the people who destroyed him were worth impressing in the first place. I assigned the reading and dismissed class early. Had to. The tension was thick enough to choke on, and I could feel the storm building. Emma was the first to leave. Books clutched to her chest like armor. Dylan remained in his seat, staring at her empty chair like it had personally offended him. "Mr. Mitchell," I said as the room emptied. "A word?" He shouldered his lacrosse bag, all 6 feet 2 inches of carefully cultivated intimidation. "If this is about what I said, it's about what you're planning." I interrupted. "I know that look. I've seen it before." He smiled then, his father's smile, the one that preceded hostile takeovers and crushed competitors. "I don't know what you mean, Ms. Walsh. I'm just concerned about maintaining Westfield standards. Some of us have legacy to protect." Legacy. At Westfield. That word was both shield and sword. After he left, I sat in my empty classroom thinking about my own first year. How Courtney Pemberton had decided I was her special project. The whisper campaigns, the destroyed homework, the accidents that left me covered in lunch or locked in supply closets. How I'd survived by becoming invisible, grateful, unthreatening. How I'd spent 20 years telling myself it had made me stronger. But Emma Rodriguez wasn't interested in invisibility, and that terrified me more than anything. The next few weeks unfolded with the brutal precision of a military campaign. Dylan's opening salvo with the parking space photo had marked Emma as a target, and Westfield's elite fell in line like soldiers. Someone poured super glue in her locker. Her textbooks disappeared and reappeared water-damaged. Her name was added to bathroom stall lists I won't repeat here. The school's anonymous gossip Instagram, Westfield Tea, featured daily posts about the charity case who thinks she's people. Through it all, Emma maintained a composure that bordered on unsettling. She arrived early enough to clean glue residue before first period. She borrowed books from the library. She ignored the Instagram posts with the discipline of someone who'd faced worse than teenage cruelty. If this reminds you of someone, a quiet kid, who took it all without breaking, who you wondered about years later, well, maybe that's why I'm telling this story. One Tuesday in October. I found Emma in my classroom during lunch. She wasn't eating, couldn't afford the cafeteria prices, and too proud to use the free lunch program that would have marked her further. She was reading ahead in our curriculum, annotating Invisible Man with the focus of a scholar. "Ellison knew about being unseen," she said without looking up. "But he also knew about being too visible. That's the paradox, isn't it? They need you to be invisible enough to ignore but visible enough to punish." I closed the door, pulled a chair close. "Emma, I need to ask you something. Why aren't you reporting any of this?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "To Principal Sterling, who had dinner at the Mitchell estate last weekend, whose son is on Dylan's lacrosse team." That Principal Sterling, she had a point. Robert Sterling's loyalty was bought and paid for with donation checks and board positions. But there had to be something. "I could help," I offered. "Write a letter, make some calls." "Ms. Walsh." Emma finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made me stop mid-sentence. Not defeat, not fear, but patience. The kind of patience that comes from playing a longer game than anyone realizes. "Did it work when you were here, when Courtney Pemberton was making your life hell?" My blood chilled. "How did you—" "I do my research," Emma said simply. Yearbook archives are public record. You were salutatorian, but didn't speak at graduation. You were on track for Columbia, but ended up at state school. You came back here to teach. Even though, she gestured at the room, the school, the weight of history, even though this place almost destroyed you. I sat back, feeling exposed. 20 years of careful construction, and this 17-year-old had seen right through it. So why, Emma asked, why come back? The truth. I'd told myself it was to help kids like us, to be the advocate I'd never had. But sitting there, being read so accurately by a teenager with older eyes than mine, I wondered if I'd just been hiding. If Westfield was my purgatory, and I'd chosen to be both prisoner and guard. I thought I could change things from the inside, I admitted. Emma nodded, returned to her book. Maybe you have. You're the only teacher who sees us as people instead of charity cases or diversity statistics. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Sophia Chen stumbled in, face flushed with panic. Emma, they're Dylan and his friends. They have your... She didn't need to finish. Emma was already moving. That same tired determination settling over her features. I followed them down the hall, my heels clicking against marble like a countdown. We found them in the senior lounge, a mahogany-paneled room that technically allowed all upperclassmen, but somehow only welcomed the right ones. Dylan held Emma's backpack high, his crew forming a semicircle of smirking privilege. Look what we found, Dylan announced. A whole bag of sadness. Let's see what food stamps girl carries around. He upended it. Books tumbled out, library copies with property of stamps. A calculator held together with duct tape. A brown paper bag that spilled 2 bruised apples and a peanut butter sandwich. And photos, a handful of worn photographs that scattered across the Persian rug. Dylan snatched one up. Oh, this is precious. Is this Daddy? Where is he? Anyway, deported prison. Or did he just realize what a disappointment his daughter would be? I saw Emma's fist clench, saw her weight shift almost imperceptibly to the balls of her feet. Saw something flicker across her face that looked dangerously like a smile. Put it down, she said quietly. Or what? Dylan stepped closer. The photo, I could see it now. A man in military dress blues dangling from his fingers. You'll cry, call mommy. Oh wait, she's probably cleaning someone's toilet right now. His friends laughed. Madison Hartwell live-streamed from the corner. The portrait of Westfield's founder gazed down like an approving patriarch. Emma took a breath. When she spoke, her voice carried something I'd never heard before. Not anger, not hurt, but certainty. My father died in Afghanistan when I was 7, she said, each word precise as a blade. That photo is from his funeral. My mother works 3 jobs, including cleaning houses, maybe even yours. And you're right, Dylan. We don't have money or connections or legacy. She stepped forward, and Dylan actually stepped back. But here's what we do have. Emma continued. We have survived things that would break you in half. We have earned every single thing we've ever gotten. And we have learned to fight in ways you can't even imagine. The room held its breath. Dylan's face cycled through confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. Then he ripped the photo in half. The sound seemed to echo off the wood panels, the oil paintings, the decades of inherited cruelty. Emma stared at the pieces falling like snow onto the antique rug. Oops, Dylan said. Guess some things are just too fragile for Westfield. His mistake was turning his back on her to high-five Marcus Thompson. His bigger mistake was assuming that a girl who'd lost everything had nothing left to lose. Emma moved not with the wild anger Dylan expected, but with precision. She scooped up half of the torn photo, tucked it carefully into her pocket, then gathered her scattered belongings with methodical calm. When she stood, she looked through Dylan like he was made of glass. "You're right," she said. "Some things are too fragile for Westfield, but I'm not one of them." She walked out, Sophia trailing behind. I waited a beat, then followed, catching up in the empty hallway. "Emma." "Don't," she said without stopping. "Please, Ms. Walsh, just don't." I watched her walk away, spine straight, steps measured. It wasn't until she turned the corner that I heard it, a sound so quiet I might have imagined it. Emma Rodriguez, who'd taken weeks of torture without flinching, was finally crying. But here's what Dylan Mitchell didn't know. What none of them knew, tears can be fuel as much as water. And Emma. She was about to burn the whole thing down. That night, I pulled out my own Westfield yearbook, found my senior picture smiling, hopeful, trying so hard to look like I belonged. Found Courtney Pemberton's quote, "Winners win, it's what we do." I thought about Emma's torn photograph, about fathers who never came home and mothers who cleaned other people's messes, about scholarship kids who walked through Westfield's halls like mice in a maze built by cats, about the fact that in 3 weeks, homecoming rally would put every student in one room, and Dylan Mitchell had just given Emma Rodriguez a reason to stop playing defense. I closed the yearbook and did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I picked up my phone and started making calls. Not to Principal Sterling or the school board, they were lost causes, but to people who might remember what it felt like to be 17 and targeted. To journalists who specialized in education inequality. To lawyers who took pro bono cases against institutional bullying. Because if Emma Rodriguez was done being invisible, then maybe it was time I stopped hiding too. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the October air, see it in the way Emma moved through the halls with new purpose. Dylan thought he'd broken her with that photo. He had no idea what he'd actually unleashed. 3 weeks until homecoming. 3 weeks until Westfield Preparatory Academy learned that sometimes. The mouse had been a lion all along. She just needed the right reason to roar. The 3 weeks before homecoming passed like movements in a symphony, quiet passages building to inevitable crescendo. I watched Emma with the fascination of someone witnessing a controlled demolition. She'd stopped trying to blend in. Instead, she moved through Westfield's halls with the deliberate calm of someone who'd made a decision. Dylan, drunk on his own cruelty, mistook her silence for surrender. His campaign intensified. Someone spray-painted, "Return to sender" on her locker. Her scholarship paperwork was mysteriously lost, requiring hours of meetings to restore. The Whisper Network suggested she was sleeping with teachers for grades, a rumor vicious enough to make even Madison Hartwell uncomfortable. But Emma had developed a strange new habit. Every morning, she'd arrive at 6:30 an hour before her usual time. Security cameras showed her in the auxiliary gym, the one nobody used, moving through what looked like a violent ballet. I asked Mr. Kowalski, our security head, about it. "Girls got training," he said, rewinding the footage. "That's not YouTube self-defense. That's muscle memory." I thought about her Aunt Helen, the one Rosa had mentioned in passing, the one Emma spent summers with, a Medal of Honor recipient who'd retired to Bridgeport and ran some kind of fitness program for at-risk youth. The pieces were starting to form a picture that made my chest tight with anticipation. The Monday before homecoming. I found Emma in the library, surrounded by law books. "Light reading?" I asked. She looked up, and for the first time in weeks, smiled. "Did you know Connecticut has some of the strongest anti-bullying laws in the country? Criminal penalties if there's physical assault, civil liabilities that extend to institutions that enable harassment." "Emma," I sat down, lowering my voice. "What are you planning?" "Nothing," she said, returning to her books. "I'm just educating myself about my rights. Isn't that what Westfield's all about?" Education. That smile worried me more than tears ever could. 2 days before the rally, Sophia Chen cornered me after class. "Ms. Walsh, I'm scared. Emma's been different. She gave me this." She handed me an envelope. Said to open it if something happens at homecoming. I held the sealed envelope, torn between my role as teacher and my growing certainty that Emma Rodriguez was about to teach Westfield a lesson it desperately needed. "Sophia, has Dylan threatened anything specific about homecoming?" She bit her lip. "There's a group chat. I'm not in it. But Marcus Thompson showed me they're planning something. Dylan keeps saying he's going to put the charity case in her place once and for all, in front of everyone." My blood chilled. Homecoming rally was Westfield's biggest tradition, mandatory attendance. Alumni guests, local media, 800 people in the main gymnasium. Whatever Dylan was planning, it would be public, devastating, final. That night, I broke a cardinal rule. I called Emma directly. "Don't go to the rally," I said without preamble. Silence. Then, "Is that Catherine Walsh, the teacher, speaking? Or Catherine Walsh, the survivor?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Both." "Then you know I have to go," Emma said quietly. "You know what happens if I don't. To the next scholarship kid. To the one after that. You know because you've watched it happen for 20 years. She was right. God help me. She was right. At least let me help," I pleaded. "I've been making calls." "I know," Emma interrupted. "Thank you, but this has to happen a certain way. Just have your phone ready. And Ms. Walsh, whatever happens, remember I chose it." She hung up, leaving me with dread sitting in my stomach like lead. Homecoming morning dawned crisp and bright. Connecticut autumn at its most deceptive. The school buzzed with anticipation decorations in Westfield crimson and gold. Alumni Mercedes filling the visitor lot. Local news vans setting up for feel-good segments about tradition and excellence. I saw Emma enter the building at 7 sharp, wearing the one good dress she owned, simple, black, appropriate. She'd pulled her hair back in a tight bun. Her face showed nothing. But her eyes were writing checks that Dylan Mitchell was about to cash. The morning crawled by. I couldn't focus. Kept checking my phone. Kept watching the clock. At lunch, I overheard Madison Hartwell in the bathroom. "Dylan's got something planned," she whispered to another girl. "Says the scholarship girl needs to learn her place. He's been drinking already, you know how he gets." My hands shook as I washed them. I should report this, should go to Sterling, demand intervention. But I knew how that would go. Dylan would deny. His friends would corroborate. And Emma would be labeled a troublemaker. The system protected its own. 2:45. The rally would start in 15 minutes. I made my way to the gymnasium, claimed a spot where I could see everything. The space filled quickly students, faculty, board members, alumni, even some local dignitaries. Principal Sterling glad-handed his way through the crowd, willfully blind to the tension crackling like static. Emma entered alone, took a seat in the section designated for juniors. I watched Dylan track her movement from across the gym where he stood with the lacrosse team. He'd definitely been drinking that loose-limbed confidence, that cruel smile. His teammates kept slapping his back, hyping him up for something. The rally began with typical pageantry, band playing, cheerleaders tumbling, Sterling droning about excellence and tradition. Then came the moment I'd been dreading, the challenges, where team captains could call out students for fundraising competitions. A tradition meant to build school spirit that had evolved into sanctioned humiliation. Dylan took the microphone, scanning the crowd with predatory patience. "I'd like to issue a special challenge," he announced. Words slightly slurred. "See, Westfield's about standards, about belonging, and sometimes we get contamination." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sterling looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. "Emma Rodriguez," Dylan continued, spotlight finding her immediately. "I challenge you to prove you belong here, right now. Show everyone what you've got to offer Westfield besides," he paused, smiled, "diversity statistics." Emma stood slowly. The gymnasium held its breath as she made her way to the floor. She took the offered microphone, looked around at 800 faces, most hostile, some pitying, a few genuinely curious. "What did you have in mind?" she asked calmly. Dylan's grin widened. "Let's see what's under the scholarship wrapper. What are you hiding?" Rodriguez. Before anyone could react, before Sterling could remember his job, before I could scream the warning trapped in my throat, Dylan grabbed Emma's dress at the shoulder and pulled. The sound of tearing fabric echoed through the gymnasium like a gunshot. Emma stood in the spotlight, dress hanging in ruins, exposed in front of everyone. Gasps, laughs, phones raising to record. Dylan stepped back, arms spread in mock innocence. "Oops, guess some people just can't afford quality." This was it. The moment Dylan thought would break her. The moment he'd been building toward for weeks. Total humiliation in front of the entire Westfield community. Emma Rodriguez looked down at her ruined dress. Then she did something nobody expected. She laughed. Not hysterical laughter. Not broken laughter. The kind of laugh you might hear from someone who'd just remembered the punchline to a very long joke. "You want to see what I'm hiding?" Emma asked, her voice carrying to every corner of the now silent gymnasium. "Okay." She shrugged off the remains of her dress, standing in athletic shorts and a tank top she'd worn underneath. But it wasn't her clothing that made the crowd gasp. It was the way she moved. Emma Rodriguez shifted her stance, weight balanced, hands loose at her sides. Every line of her body radiated controlled power. She looked like what she was, someone who'd spent 3 months learning violence from a woman who'd survived 4 tours in Afghanistan. "Here's what I'm hiding," Emma said conversationally. 3 months of Krav Maga training, 6 days a week, 4 hours a day. My Aunt Helen, you know, the one with the Medal of Honor, she thought I might need it. Guess she was right. Dylan, drunk and angry and fatally overconfident, charged. Emma moved like water, like lightning. Like every moment of humiliation and cruelty had been transformed into pure kinetic energy. She sidestepped his rush, caught his arm, used his momentum against him. Dylan Mitchell, 6'2". 190 pounds of lacrosse muscle hit the gymnasium floor with a sound that made everyone flinch. He rolled, came up swinging. Emma ducked, stepped inside his reach, brought her elbow up into his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a whoosh. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, forced him to his knees. "Stay down," she said quietly. But Dylan, ego burning brighter than sense, tried again, This time Emma didn't hold back. A sweep took his legs. A palm strike sent him sprawling when he struggled up once more. She ended it with a textbook throw that left him flat on his back, her knee on his chest, his arm locked in a submission hold that had him tapping frantically against the floor. The whole thing had taken 30 seconds. Emma released him, stepped back, surveyed the silent gymnasium. Dylan lay groaning, nose bleeding, ego shattered more thoroughly than any physical damage. She walked to where her ruined dress lay, picked it up, folded it carefully. "I don't need to prove I belong here," she said, microphone forgotten but voice carrying anyway. "I've been proving it every day. While you were worrying about parking spaces and Instagram followers, I was earning straight A's. While you were protecting your legacy, I was building one." She looked directly at Dylan, then at Sterling, then at the board members in their special seats. "But you want to know the truth. The real truth. I don't want to belong here. Not to this. Not to a place that protects bullies and punishes victims. Not to a system that measures worth in dollars instead of character." Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another. Then dozens. Mostly younger students, scholarship kids. The invisible ones who'd been waiting for someone to say what Emma was saying. That's when Marcus Thompson did the thing that changed everything. He held up his phone and shouted, "Got the whole thing already live." The gymnasium erupted. Sterling rushed toward Emma, face purple with rage, but stopped when he realized how many phones were recording. Parents were standing, some appalled, others oddly proud. Board members huddled like startled birds. I pushed through the crowd, reached Emma just as security arrived. "Don't touch her," I said loudly. She was defending herself against assault. I witnessed everything. So did 800 others. Mr. Kowalski, bless him, nodded. "We'll need to review the footage. Mr. Mitchell, you'll need to come with us." "Me?" Dylan struggled to his feet, face swollen with more than physical bruising. "She attacked me. You all saw." "We saw you assault a female student." A voice interrupted. An older woman in the alumni section stood up. "We saw you destroy her clothing in a premeditated act of harassment. And we saw her defend herself with remarkable restraint." More voices joined in. The narrative Dylan had thought he controlled was spiraling away from him. His friends backed away. Even Madison looked sick. Emma turned to me, and for the first time since her father's photo was torn, I saw tears in her eyes. But they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of release. The aftermath came in waves. Marcus's video went viral within hours. The headline, "Bully Gets Schooled by Girl He Tormented," trending nationally. Other victims came forward, not just from Westfield but from Dylan's previous schools. A pattern emerged that his family's money had hidden for years. By that evening, the Mitchell family lawyer was in Sterling's office. By morning, Dylan was withdrawn from Westfield. The official story was pursuing opportunities elsewhere. The real story, whispered through marble halls, was that faced with potential criminal charges and civil lawsuits, the Mitchells had cut their losses. Emma returned to school the next week to find her locker decorated with flowers and thank-you notes. Kids who'd never spoken to her nodded in hallways. The scholarship students walked a little taller. But the real change came from the November board meeting. The Mitchell family, in a final act of spite, withdrew their $5 million pledge for the new athletic center. Sterling nearly wept presenting this to the board. Then something extraordinary happened. "I'd like to make a donation," said Mrs. Chen, Sophia's mother. $1 million for a new scholarship fund. I'd like it named after Emma Rodriguez. I'll match that. Another parent stood, then another, by the end of the meeting. 20 families had pledged over $10 million for what would become the Emma Rodriguez Courage Fund, supporting students who showed bravery in the face of institutional oppression. Emma herself seemed bemused by it all. We sat in my classroom the day before Thanksgiving break. The campus unusually quiet. "I didn't want to be a symbol," she said, staring out at the parking lot where it all began. "I just wanted to get an education." "Sometimes we don't choose our moments," I offered. "They choose us," she smiled. Something Aunt Helen used to say. Sometimes you fight because you want to. Sometimes you fight because you have to. But sometimes you fight so the next person won't have to. "Will you stay?" I asked. At Westfield, Emma considered this. Yes, but not to fit in. To make sure fitting in stops being the price of admission. 6 months later, I sat in Sanders Theater at Harvard, watching Emma Rodriguez give her salutatorian speech at Westfield's graduation. She wore a simple white dress, not expensive. But hers. She spoke about courage and kindness, about systems that protect the powerful and the cost of breaking them. In the audience, I saw Principal Sterling. He'd announced his retirement, the board members who'd voted for change, and dozens of students who'd found their voices in the wake of Emma's stand. I saw Rosa Rodriguez crying proud tears, Aunt Helen in full dress uniform, and Sophia Chen bearing witness to friendship forged in fire. But mostly I saw myself, 20 years younger, wishing I'd had Emma's courage, wishing I'd fought back instead of fitting in, wishing I'd roared instead of whispered. After the ceremony, Emma found me in the crowd. "Ms. Walsh, I got into Harvard, full scholarship. They mentioned your recommendation letter specifically." I hugged her. This girl who'd reminded me that teaching wasn't about maintaining systems, but about changing them. "What will you study?" I asked. "Law," she said without hesitation. "Corporate law first, to understand their weapons, then civil rights. Because there are Westfields everywhere, and they all need someone willing to tear down the dress code." As I write this, Emma's in her second year at Harvard Law. The Courage Fund has supported 47 students and counting. Dylan Mitchell works for his father's company. His lacrosse dreams and easy cruelty replaced by spreadsheets and settlement agreements. And me, I still teach at Westfield. But now I tell this story on the first day of class. Every year, about parking spaces and torn photographs. About choosing your moment and finding your roar. About a girl who took 30 seconds to change 150 years of tradition. Because sometimes the best education doesn't come from textbooks or lectures. Sometimes it comes from watching someone refuse to break. Sometimes it comes from learning that the mouse was never really a mouse at all. She was just waiting for the right reason to show her claws. Last week, I received an email that made me smile. Emma Rodriguez, now Emma Rodriguez, Esquire, had just won her first major case, a class action against a prestigious boarding school in Massachusetts for systematic discrimination against scholarship students. The settlement included not just financial compensation, but mandatory reforms to admission, disciplinary, and support policies. She'd attached a photo from the courthouse steps. There she stood in a sharp black suit, surrounded by her clients, teenagers who looked exactly like we once did. Scared but hopeful, tired but unbroken. In the background, barely visible, was a small framed photo on her office wall. I zoomed in and felt my throat tighten. It was her father in his dress blues, The same photo Dylan had torn. She'd kept both halves, had them professionally restored, underneath. A small plaque, "Some things are too strong to tear." Her email ended with a simple line, "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." But that's where Emma was wrong. She was never invisible. She was just waiting. And in the end, that's what I learned from Emma Rodriguez. That courage isn't the absence of fear or pain. It's the decision to stand up anyway. To take 30 seconds and change everything. To be the reason someone else won't have to fight alone. The parking space that started it all, it's just a parking space now. But the girl who parked there that September morning, she became a revolution.